D.C. this week. He will no doubt elaborate. Americans,
Mr.
Netanyahu will visit Washington, D.C. this week. He will no doubt elaborate in private on his strategy for wider war in the Middle East. His plans should be taken seriously by every American citizen. At this moment, the war in Gaza has already destroyed or disrupted millions of lives. Precise numbers are hard to confirm, but hundreds of thousands of Palestinians and increasingly Israelis have been internally displaced, wounded, or killed. These aren't just numbers. They are shattered families and ruined lives. And yet, there are policymakers in Washington contemplating war with Iran. I ask you, if the human cost of the war in Gaza, a localized conflict, is this high, how much higher will the cost of a war with Iran be? For decades, we've lurched from one costly conflict to another: Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Somalia, and Ukraine. The price? Tens of trillions and tens of thousands of American lives. But who pays this price? Not the policymakers or defense contractors who profit from these wars. It's the children of farmers, truckers, nurses, and plumbers who fight, suffer, and die. We confront the emergence of new alliances determined to stop American meddling in the affairs of other countries. These new alliances include Iran, Russia, China, and a host of others who wait on the sidelines to join in the effort to stop Washington's reckless interventions. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov's recent warning that any conflict with Iran risks drawing in other major global powers must be taken seriously. Let me be clear, no state, especially a free democratic republic like ours, should ever threaten war unless it's fully prepared to follow through. At this point in our history, Washington knows, or should know, that our nation and armed forces are not ready for a war with major military powers 6,000 to 7,000 miles from the United States. We're close to $35 trillion in debt. This is almost 100% of our gross domestic product. We're paying $2.4 billion in interest every day. Everybody in Washington should have understood this a long time ago. A war with Iran would devastate our economy. Imagine the Straits of Hormuz, a narrow sea highway between Iran and Arab countries, closed. Every day, 1/5 of the world's oil travels through this passage. If war shuts it down, gas prices would skyrocket, affecting everything from your daily commute to the cost of groceries. We're already feeling the punch from Houthi disruptions in the Red Sea. Now picture that problem multiplied many times over. A full-scale war with Iran wouldn't just be an inconvenience. It would trigger an economic crisis that would hit every American family hard, potentially leading to job losses, fortunes wiped out, and a deep recession. And let's not forget, at the outset of every conflict, those advocating for war are always convinced it will be short and decisive. History shows that they are nearly always wrong. We've seen this before in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Ukraine. Strategies fail, yet instead of reassessment, we double down on failure. The same think tanks, pundits, and contractors push for more conflict, more spending, more sacrifice from others. This isn't just a failure of strategy, it's a failure of accountability. We must remember that the first priority in national military strategy is the security and preservation of the nation itself. Any action that could put the survival of our state at risk must be avoided at all costs. A war with Iran, with its potential to escalate into a global conflict, poses just such a risk. This is where you come in. Call your representatives, express your displeasure, remind them of the reality at home. 70% of Americans still live paycheck to paycheck, struggling with high food and fuel prices. To our policymakers, before pledging support for military action against Iran or any other country, consider the welfare of your constituents. The single mother working 2 jobs, the veteran battling PTSD, the young couple postponing a family because they can't afford a home? Are you willing to tell them their suffering is worth another war? The self-defeating policy of open-ended military interventions with unattainable military objectives must end. Americans must break the cycle of unaccountable decision-making and recognize that America's true strength lies not in our ability to wage war, but in our capacity to build peace, a peace that benefits the United States and the world. Americans, your country needs you now, not to fight in foreign lands, but to fight here at home for prosperity and peace, for accountability, and for a government that puts your needs first. Call your representatives, speak out in your communities. Let the halls of power echo with the voice of Americans who believe America's needs for peace and prosperity must come first. Thank you for listening. And may God bless you, these United States, with the wisdom and courage to secure a peaceful and prosperous future for everyone.
Benjamin Netanyahu is back in Washington. This time the stakes couldn't be higher. His visit comes amidst escalating tensions with Iran, with whispers of war growing louder. Netanyahu, a familiar face in the halls of American power, is here to make a case for American intervention. He argues that Iran poses an existential threat, a threat that demands a swift and decisive response. But before we march in lockstep with Netanyahu's war drums, we need to ask ourselves, at what cost? Look no further than Gaza for a glimpse into the potential horrors of another Middle Eastern war. The images are seared into our collective memory. Bombed-out buildings, children pulled from rubble, families torn apart. The human cost of the conflict is immeasurable, a generation scarred by violence and displacement. Gaza stands as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of war, a cautionary tale etched in blood and suffering. Is this the future we want to repeat, this time on an even larger scale? War with Iran wouldn't be a walk in the park. It wouldn't be a swift surgical strike with a neat and tidy ending. Iran is not Iraq in 2003. It boasts a large, sophisticated military, deeply entrenched and ready for a protracted conflict. Think of the mountains of Afghanistan, the urban warfare of Iraq, and multiply that complexity tenfold. We're talking about a potential quagmire, a war that could drag on for years, costing countless lives and trillions of dollars. Remember the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq? They were conflicts that defined a generation, shaping global politics and altering countless lives. The wars sold on faulty intelligence and false promises. We were told about weapons of mass destruction, imminent threats, and the need for preemptive action. We were told they would be quick, decisive victories, liberating oppressed people and spreading democracy. The initial invasions seemed to promise just that, with rapid advances and the toppling of regimes. Instead, we got 20 years of bloodshed, instability, and a colossal waste of American lives and treasure. The reality was far more complex and brutal than the promises made. These wars have left a trail of broken promises and shattered lives, both in the region and here at home. Families torn apart, communities destroyed, and a generation of veterans grappling with the scars of war. They serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of foreign intervention, the unforeseen consequences that ripple through time and space. The hubris of believing we can impose our will through military might. These conflicts have shown us the limits of power and the importance of understanding the complexities of the regions we engage with. As we look back, we must learn from these experiences. The cost of war is not just measured in dollars or lives lost, but in the lasting impact on societies and the global order. Moving forward, we must strive for diplomacy, understanding, and cooperation. Only then can we hope to build a more peaceful and just world. The world pushes back shifting global alliances. Here's another inconvenient truth: the world is tired of America's wars. Our allies, once eager partners in military adventures, are increasingly hesitant, skeptical of our motives, and weary of the endless cycle of violence. New alliances are forming, alliances that prioritize diplomacy and cooperation over military solutions. The global landscape is shifting, and America's go-it-alone approach to foreign policy is leaving us increasingly isolated on the world stage. The price of war, America's economic reckoning. Today, we delve into the financial toll that decades of conflict have exacted on the United States. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, the cost. The staggering, often hidden cost of war. Wars are expensive, and not just in the lives lost and families shattered. The financial burden is immense, stretching far beyond the battlefield. We're talking trillions of dollars, an astronomical sum that continues to grow with each passing year. This is money diverted from essential services like education, healthcare, and infrastructure, the very pillars that make a country strong and prosperous. These wars are financed on credit, adding to the national debt and creating a financial burden that will be felt for generations. Mortgaging our children's future for endless conflicts in distant lands is a choice that has long-term consequences. Is this the legacy we want to leave behind? A legacy of financial instability and a generation saddled with the costs of our military misadventures? A mountain of debt and a generation burdened with the financial fallout of decisions made long before they were born? The economic reckoning is not just a future concern, it is a present reality that affects every American today. The impact of this financial strain is felt in our daily lives, from the quality of our schools to the state of our healthcare system. Our infrastructure is crumbling, and the funds needed for repairs and improvements are being siphoned off to fund military endeavors. Families across the nation are feeling the pinch, struggling to make ends meet as the cost of living rises and wages stagnate. The call for better public services grows louder, yet the resources to meet these demands are increasingly scarce. Our youth, the future of this nation, are left to bear the brunt of these financial decisions, facing a world of limited opportunities and mounting debt. Even our veterans, those who have served and sacrificed, often find themselves neglected, their needs overshadowed by the ongoing costs of war. It's time for a national conversation about our priorities and the true cost of war. We must ask ourselves, is this the path we want to continue on? The future of America depends on the choices we make today. It's time to reckon with the economic realities and chart a course towards a more sustainable and prosperous future for all. The home front neglect and decay. While our leaders are fixated on foreign interventions, our own house is crumbling, our roads are falling apart, our schools are underfunded, our healthcare system is a mess. Millions of Americans are struggling to make ends meet, while our government pours trillions into endless wars. It's time to shift our priorities, to invest in our own people and rebuild our own nation. We can't afford to be the world's policeman if our own house is on fire. Time for choice: war or prosperity. We're at a crossroads. We can continue down the path of endless war, bankrupting our nation and sacrificing our children's future on the altar of military might. Or we can choose a different path, a path of diplomacy, cooperation, and investment in our own people. We can choose to be a nation that leads by example, not by force. The choice is ours, but the time to choose is now. Raising our voices, the power of the citizen. Here's the good news. We, the citizens, have a voice. We may not have the billions of dollars of lobbyists or the access to the halls of power, but we have something even more powerful: our voices and our votes. We can contact our elected officials, demand accountability, and insist on a foreign policy that prioritizes peace and diplomacy over endless war. We can support organizations working to promote peace and understanding and hold our leaders responsible for their actions. Contact your representatives, make your voice heard. Don't underestimate the power of a phone call, an email, or a letter. Our elected officials work for us, and they need to hear from us. Tell them that you're tired of endless wars, that you want your tax dollars invested in education and healthcare, not bombs and drones. Tell them that you demand a foreign policy based on diplomacy and cooperation, not military interventionism. Your voice matters, and together our voices can make a difference. A future of peace, our shared responsibility. The pursuit of peace is not a passive endeavor, it's an active choice. It involves each one of us in our daily lives, making decisions that promote harmony and understanding. It requires constant vigilance, a willingness to speak truth to power, and a commitment to building a more just and equitable world. This means standing up against injustice whenever we see it and advocating for those who cannot speak for themselves. It's a responsibility we all share as citizens of this country and as citizens of the world. We must recognize that our actions, no matter how small, have a ripple effect that can contribute to a larger movement for peace. Let's choose peace, not war. This choice begins in our hearts and minds and extends to our communities and nations. By fostering a culture of peace, we can create environments where conflicts are resolved through dialogue and mutual respect. Let's invest in our future, not in endless conflict. Investing in education, healthcare, and sustainable development can pave the way for a brighter, more peaceful future for all. Let's build a world where diplomacy triumphs over violence and where all people can live in peace and security. This requires international cooperation and a commitment to resolving disputes through peaceful means. The time to act is now. We cannot afford to wait for others to take the lead. Each of us has a role to play in creating a peaceful world. Whether it's through volunteering, advocating for policy changes, or simply being kind to our neighbors, every action counts. By embracing our shared humanity and celebrating our differences, we can build bridges of understanding and cooperation. Let's work together to create a world where everyone feels valued and respected. Peace is not just the absence of war, but the presence of justice, equality, and opportunity. It's about creating conditions where everyone can thrive. Let's commit to this vision and take concrete steps to make it a reality. Our shared responsibility is to ensure that future generations inherit a world that is more peaceful, just, and equitable. Together we can make a difference. Let's start today.